Good evening, campers, it's me, Kieran. Today we are going to talk about one of the pioneering pieces of science fiction ever written. That is Isaac Asimov's Foundation. Published between the 1940s and the 1950s as a collection of short stories and novellas within the magazine Astonishing Science Fiction, Asimov's series Foundation is seminal. In fact, one of science fiction's most lauded prizes, the Hugo Award, announced it as being the best series of all time. The series consists of Foundation, Foundation and Empire, and then the second Foundation. The Foundation series maintained to be a trilogy for a long time, but persistence from adoring fans, actually it's akin to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, where he killed off Sherlock and then the fans were like, we need more, so had to bring it back. So Asimov did. After second Foundation, there's Foundation's Edge, followed by Foundation and Earth. So after 3 decades with 3 books, we now have 5, but the fans still wanted more, so Asimov wrote 2 prequels, Prelude to Foundation and Forward to Foundation. With 7 books within the Foundation series, it means that Asimov wrote this series over 51 years, 1942 to 1993. And there has been a resurgence in people's desire to read Foundation because of Apple TV's series Foundation. Now, if you've only watched the TV series and you've not read the books, please know they are very different. The biggest difference that you're going to notice is that Salvor and Gale are actually men. And if you finish season 1, you'll know why that's like a really big difference. Additionally, with the Empire, there's no Brother Dawn, Day and Dusk. They don't exist. But everything surrounding Harry Seldon and his idea of psycho-history is pretty spot on. For the sake of clarity, in this video we're only going to be talking about this collection, Foundation. We'll cover Foundation and Empire and Second Foundation in their own videos. This is where you want to start. If you've not read the books or watched the series, what is Foundation about? Simply put, Harry Seldon has developed a theory of psycho-history. Seldon predicts that if everything is to stay as it is, alongside the fall of the Empire, there will be 30,000 years of turmoil, chaos, and carnage. However, Seldon believes that he can alleviate some of this if he is to take a handful of intellectuals, the encyclopedists, and create a new foundation for society. As such, Seldon and his collective are exiled to a remote, faraway planet, Terminus. This is the Foundation. However, there is a second Foundation on the other side of the galaxy, of which we know very little about. On Terminus, after decades past, the society has settled, but Harry Seldon's dead. But luckily for us, there's a time vault, and within there's a hologram of Harry Seldon. Upon being activated, holographic Seldon tells everyone that the real reason they're there is to offset a series of Seldon crises, which will prevent the ultimate downfall of the Empire and the galaxy and the 30,000 years of chaos, carnage, and death. But those on Terminus are a little bit perplexed because they have no defences. They have nothing to arm themselves with, only their intellect and wit. But I wonder what the second Foundation have over on the other side of the universe that Seldon set up. Well, guess what? You're gonna have to get to the 3rd book to find out, aren't you? I know we've only just covered it, but I think it's worth stressing here in regards to the publication history of Foundation. This was a series of novellas and short stories provided to a magazine, and therefore Foundation feels very distinct within its stories. This is not a collection of interconnected stories. These are more a continuation on that are interrelated, meaning that with each story we're moving into the future, but the ramifications and everything that has happened in the previous story haven't really got a direct impact on the next. And so at times Foundation can feel very jarring, with a cacophony of characters who come into the forefront are very subsequently pushed back out into space. Trying to ground yourself within this story does feel like a bit of a pointless activity, because you know you're going to swiftly be moving on throughout the years, throughout the solar system. In being a seminal and groundbreaking work of science fiction that has definitely influenced a lot of the genre. You would expect this to be very science forefront, but in fact I see Foundation more as a political diatribe, a discussion of argument and persuasion between binaries, where every single one of the 5 stories that create Foundation can be distilled into X versus Y. Technology, the science, it is very hand-wavy. It doesn't go into any real depth. Foundation predominantly is people speaking in rooms. Thinking back about the publication history, Asimov does something that Dickens does. Charles Dickens used to write for penny dreadfuls, meaning that chapters had to be fairly contained but also want to entice readers to pick up the next copy. Asimov's work is action-filled, mostly at the end of every collection, and very rushed. This is executed the best with Read Us Within the Mayor's story. You've probably guessed my opinion on this, but the first collection of Foundation is dull. It's tiresome. And I can see a lot of readers picking this up and going, yeah, you know what, I think I'm done with this series. But the mule has not been introduced yet, and we're going to meet the mule in the next book. Asimov really does hitch up, straddles the mule, and really gallops on with this series. Alas, in order to get to the good stuff, you're gonna have to grit your teeth with this one, and that's why Foundation for me is like a 2 out of 10. Foundation Empire is very similar to the structure of Foundation. Whereas Foundation was a collection of 5 short stories, Foundation and Empire is 2 novellas. The General and, oh, I can't wait to talk about it, the Mule! Mule. The Mule for me is the best part of Asimov's Foundation. I'm really glad that he finally turned up in Apple's Foundation! Season 2, Episode 2. We can't talk about the Mule yet, we have to go chronologically. We need to talk about the General. The General that follows Belrios on the planet Suena is classic Asimov to a fault. Hand-wavy world building and a lot of talking in rooms, with Asimov generally talking about his ideas rather than building characters. Again, everyone within the General, like in Foundation, almost feels the same. There's no richness, there's no depth, there's nothing really emotional that you can attach to these people. Asimov's prose work is known for its dry and clinical nature, and I don't think that helps in this matter. On the other hand, we have this concept of the Galactic Empire decline, and this is vitally important because it allows for the introduction of the Mule! Mule. Go on, let's get into the Mule, where Asimov's storytelling and how he's constructed a story, how he finally gives depth to characters, how he's able to get you to root for characters, finally begins to blossom. To recap, the grand narrative of Foundation is that Harry Seldon, via his theory of psychohistory, has foreseen the Galactic Empire crumbling, and through a series of Seldon crises, there might be a way to avert the basic destruction of everything. The first Foundation was sent in one direction to Terminus. The second Foundation was sent somewhere else on the opposite side. We don't really know much about them. Maybe the third book will unlock that for us. But as much as Harry Seldon believes in psychohistory and submits to the numbers and the data at his fingertips, there will always be an anomaly. There will always be something that you didn't expect, and that is the singular individual, the Mule! Mule single-handedly is upsetting the balance around the Foundation. He taps into and manipulates people's fears and emotions to bring them onto his side. The Mule being perceived as a new threat and possibly a Seldon crisis himself. The traders and the leaders of the Foundation bandy together in order to quell the Mule. Who the Mule is, we don't entirely know, and the novella is almost a whodunit, or who does it, or who is currently Mule. Asimov within the Mule shows the limitations of psychohistory. Everything so far has basically been bow down to Sari Helden, his hologram will just tell us what to do and everything will be okay. But the hologram of Harry Seldon doesn't predict the Mule at all. He thinks that the problem is going to rise with the traders. The Foundation, given its independence of thought, is somewhat in turmoil. So now we're going to follow the motley crew of 4 people. Torren and Beta, who are citizens, Evelyn is a psychologist, and a clown called Magnifico Giganticus. I would personally love to be a fly on the wall, watching Asimov crafted this groundbreaking piece of science fiction and somehow just goes, I need a clown. And because of Magnifico the clown, you know shenanigans are going to ensue, and ensue they do. The master manipulator and destructor, the Mule, must be found, and therefore we have a quite enticing read. Okay, so towards the end it can feel a little bit contrived and things just happen to go the way that it just needs to be. However, I think the last few pages definitely do justify some of the bland nature of Asimov's work. The Mule is integral to Foundation because within this story it underpins the two main themes, determinism and individualism. We as the reader begin to understand that the Foundation aren't as free as they thought. They don't have determinism, they don't have individualism, because they all submit and bow down to the holograph of Harry Seldon. They believe in psycho-history, so much so that they don't really know what to do on their own. The Mule is doing the exact same thing, but rather than being analytical like Seldon, he's emotive. While Foundation and Empire could be reduced down to a simple good versus evil story, Asimov changes the perspective. What is good and what is evil? What distinguishes and defines those characteristics, and how do you measure them? Foundation and Empire definitely is groundbreaking in its themes, and definitely groundbreaking for Asimov's writing. Sadly, it's not ground-shaking. Nevertheless, a vast improvement from the book prior, and that's why I would give Foundation and Empire a 5 out of 10. Second Foundation, the last of Asimov's Foundation series. It's been a long time coming, but after reviewing Foundation and Empire, we're now ready to see the finale of Second Foundation, where we are finally going to talk about Harry Seldon's far-off distant Foundation and why everyone wants to find it. But before we discuss any of that, know that this book was published in 1953, and after a long hiatus, it would take years, over a decade, for Asimov to pen the rest of the Foundation novels. Subjective opinion aside, there is no argument that bookmarking this trilogy with Second Foundation revolutionized the sci-fi game. Foundation as a trilogy is a landmark moment in sci-fi. It truly revolutionized the genre and really put forward the foundation, you're welcome, you can have that for free, of what the tropes, the cliches of space opera that we expect today. However, when you hear space opera, I understand that you might be thinking about Star Wars, and that's quite action-packed. And one thing that has to be said about Foundation in its entirety is that they are very conversation-heavy. They are debate-focused. There's not a lot of action here. Asimov here is really building on his ideas and also the understanding of the planetary system that he has created. The Second Foundation does serve to revisit the planet of Asimov's creations, really tying everything together nicely. Comprised of two stories, this novel focuses on the find for the elusive Second Foundation that we have waited over the last two books to find, to understand what exactly the Second Foundation is and how this fits into Harry Seldon's plan. The first story in Second Foundation revolves around the Mule, who is trying to locate the whereabouts of the Second Foundation, and we met the Mule in the second book in Foundation and Empire. And the second story, set more than half a century after the event of the Mule trying to find the Second Foundation, we find the first Foundation wanted to find the Second Foundation. So we can see how all these three books get tied up by Second Foundation. Now, the Second Foundation are really elusive. Again, we don't really know anything about them, and what we have to understand is that that's really the point. No one is meant to know about the Second Foundation. We're not meant to know anything, because there is a hubbub of psycho-historians. If they are able to keep everything in place, will stop, ultimately, the end of humanity. Ultimately, humankind are not meant to know anything about the Second Foundation. If we can learn nothing about them, everything's going to go to plan. And that's why the Mule is really important, because he is a mutant. He's a mutant who has mind-altering powers that can sway people to his wants, and he decides to find the Second Foundation, that he's going to let one person, a military protege, go untouched by his powers, for fear that under his control he's stifling the opportunity for people to give up information on the Second Foundation. Here's something that has to be said. The Harry Seldon nor the psychohistorians would be able to anticipate the amount of double crossing that go within the Mule story to find the Second Foundation. It's somewhat farcical towards the end, but nevertheless, events play out, and the First Foundation now get eyes on the Second foundation. While these two were created to prevent catastrophe, there's a bit of a conundrum. It is proposed by the technologically advanced first foundation that the second foundation are advanced in terms of society and of psychohistory, remembering that the first foundation have to rely on Harry Seldon's robot hologram. They fear that the second foundation have psychohistory under their grasp. And while these two working together would be beneficial, there is a sense of paranoia within the first foundation that the second foundation could ultimately destroy them. And what we ultimately find in the second story is something that happens in the first story, that the second foundation are not exactly what we think they are. Yet to say that there's a nice juxtaposition between the downfall of the mule and the almost betrayal of Arcadia. Now, while some people might want to read this pivotal sci-fi work, some people might be interested in reading them because they're watching Apple's adaptation. Now, as someone who has watched up until, as of recording, the end of season 2, that's all we got at the moment, and someone who's read this trilogy, I have no idea where this TV show is going. They're very different. I'm very lost. Now, for me, one of the talking points of Second Foundation, this theme does eclipse the rest of the novels. If Harry Seldon has predicted everything to a T, and the Second Foundation, in using his work and advancing his work, understand the outcome of everything, is there any free will or autonomy at all throughout the galaxy? And therefore, to some degree, is the Second Foundation to succeed because, as philosopher Tinchy Strider said, it was written in the stars a million miles away? The end of Second Foundation is very satisfying. There is a sense of stability in the air. But this is definitely thought-provoking, because while there is a sense of stability of what the Second Foundation has done, earlier on in the novel, we know that the mule is basically doing the exact same thing, but that feels inherently wrong and unjust. And therefore, is there any real difference between the mule and the Second Foundation in how they influence people? The Foundation trilogy as a whole poses the question of what is better for a society: individual agency or control. I think that's one of the reasons why readers wanted Asimov to continue this series, of which he did, but it took a very long time for him to understand how to begin that journey, and also why these books have maintained their legacy and status. But as we individually review books here, I have to say that Second Foundation, it's the best book within the trilogy, but you do have to read the previous two to understand what's going on here. You can't just jump into this, you have to do the groundwork before. But in saying that, it's very much an Asimov novel. It's not the most well written. There's a lot of boring, grey, beige conversation throughout this. So I'd give it a 5 out of 10. It's bearable. It's more bearable than the other ones. But despite finding these pretty much milquetoast from beginning to end, there has to be something said. Asimov revolutionised science fiction. And if it takes 3 bad books to really pioneer a genre, then I don't think it's 3 bad books. Despite what you think about the Foundation trilogy, you should be thankful for it.